All right, welcome one and all to the Cosmic Comic Nation, powered by Comic Con Radio. I'm your host, Tom Tormey, and my next guest is a revered and respected comic book historian. In fact, he's the administrator of the wildly popular Comic Book Historians account on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as Twitter. So you're probably already one of the thousands of followers of comic book historians. And in his role as a comic book historian, he's appeared on numerous radio and TV shows, as well as written and consulted for several graphic novels, books, and documentaries. His new book, Understanding Superhero Comics, A History of Key Elements, Creators, Events, and Controversies, is scheduled to hit bookshelves in late spring of this year, so in June of this year. And it is my pleasure to welcome the ultra-talented Alex Grant to the Cosmic Comic Nation. Alex, thank you very much for being
Yeah,
here.
thanks for having me on, Tom. I'm a longtime admirer of yours and cosmic comic history, and thank you for having me on. It's great
Oh,
finally meeting with you.
that's right. Oh, that's true. It's so cool. Yeah, we've been following each other, and as you said, I can echo the same admiration. I've been following your account for so long. It's so cool. It's so great. I personally, actually, lately, I've been seeing you post one of my favorites. I'm a big Batman '66 fan,
Yeah,
and you've been diving into the history. You've been talking about Adam West and Burt
yeah.
Ward, and it is always fun to see that kind of
Oh yeah,
tumultuous relationship that the two of them had. And I love that, Adam pressing himself as the big star, and it's always fun to watch. And Burt kind of resentful of that, and such amazing stories. I assume greatly that you're a fan of Batman '66 yourself.
well, I am. I mean, just as a kid,
Right.
there's that sentimental value
Right.
just from that, and I remember I think when Batman '89 came out, it brought back a lot of awareness of Batman '66. Like there was
Hmm.
almost like a gap where it was in syndication and not everyone was really keyed in, and the Batman '89 just brought Batmania back again. It was and that's Batmania Part Two. Just from the way I look at it
Right.
historically, because everyone was nuts over what Batman and Joker and Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton were doing. And so then everyone just wanted more Batman content at that time. And so they brought back these Batman 66, episodes, and they were syndicating them even more than they already
Hmm.
were. And then they were doing all these reunion shows like on talk shows and Adam West and Burt Ward and, the three Catwomen and Frank Gorshin, especially, who I love, I think more than all of them is Frank Gorshin, but
Right.
and Cesar Romero a little bit, coming back and finding out all about that and kind of recovering a lot of that footage and just spreading the love of that,
Right. Oh
but
yeah.
also showing some of that, and also the weird. It is kind of interesting, but the weird sexual escapades of
Oh yeah.
and Burt Ward, and
Oh yeah.
they were like whatever the Beatles went through, they kind of went through something similar for a
Hmm.
shorter amount of time, only for like 2.5 years, but it was a pretty intense 2.5 years. Burt Ward gets divorced like pretty fast,
Yeah.
and the crazy parties and hotel rooms, and it's just interesting. And then
Oh
also
yeah.
the fact that it has such an interesting mixture of colorful camp, which we call it camp. Back then, they were just calling it like a comedy show. But
Yeah. It was fun.
now we
Right.
look at it as a fun, campy thing. Can't say it adds much to the characterization, but definitely Adam West
Hmm.
and Burt Ward's chemistry is a lot of fun. Adam West's charisma in that costume is there's something special about that. When you see
Hmm.
other people, other actors, there's something kooky and interesting about Adam West. I just can't,
It,
and I'm
it,
glad he got a chance to show that,
yeah.
with Seth MacFarlane on
Oh yeah.
Family Guy.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
able to finally show that because he went through some years of not really working because of that role and being typecast. That
Hmm.
back in those days, superheroes, when you played one, you got typecast and you weren't really welcome into other genres anymore. And people would distance themselves from you because they would think that their films weren't serious if you were in it. So it was like this silent blackball, like George Reeves and Adam West and that generation. Linda Carter kind of overcame that, I think, and
Right.
Michael Keaton obviously did too. But it's more in the modern era where now it's almost like a status symbol, whereas back then it was almost like you got pushed off to the
Oh
side.
yeah. They went from
Um,
a curse in the '60s to
yeah.
the kiss of and the kiss of death back then to now it's a blessing
Yeah, it's a
to
blessing.
land.
Like now you can
Right.
be in other movies and other stuff, and now Amazon Prime and HBO
Hmm.
Max wants you. But back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, I mean, Kirk Allen in the
Oh,
late 40s, Superman serial, he ran into the same problem. They got him back for the
as
Black Hawk
right for
serial,
the
but
Blackhawks.
he
Right.
actually
Yeah.
had a hard time, finding other roles. And then George Reeves, obviously, he was kind of stuck in the Adventures of Superman show that was overseen by Whitney Ellsworth. So it's just kind of interesting. And then Adam West too. So there's something about like the late 80s and on where it's actually kind of more okay. I probably the Batman movies made that okay. Probably like,
agree.
by Batman 3 and 4, now you have Val Kilmer, you have, oh, who's going to put on the bat cowl next?
Right.
And then it was like George Clooney, and then it was, Arnold coming in as Mr. Freeze. And now it's silly, but they almost basically normalized having fun dressing up as a superhero.
I agree. And I was actually going to ask you if you thought that there was a moment at where that changed, where that comic book, even for actors, the acceptance of comic books and superheroes went from being that subculture. We don't talk about that. We don't, that's child's thing, to something that is so mainstream and wildly accepted. So
I think Christopher Reeve helped, but he was still kind of not given some roles because of the Superman role too. But he had more roles than those other people before him. Yep. And then I think Batman '89 really just, at that point, it becomes cool and fun and mainstream, and I think that helped. I think even what are we the same age? What are we?
I'm 44.
Yeah, I'm the same age. I'm 44. So
okay.
So we grew up reading the same stuff, I'm sure, in the direct market comic book system. And even when we were reading John Byrne X-Men, it was still not exactly mainstream at that point. I mean,
no, I agree.
It was still kind of like, the jocks didn't read it and we did. And
yeah.
But I think after Batman '89, in the '90s and the whole Extreme era and Image Comics, and it almost became like sex symbol in a way.
I think when you had, what was it, Rob Liefeld on the Button Your Fly commercial, where it kind of became like a rock star.
I think Rob for sure is an emblem of that era, and normalizing it and making it where like this cool young guy that looks like Matt Damon is drawing comics. I mean,
I still button my fly. Fly because
Rob gets a hard time, about for some reason. There's a lot of people jealous of it, but he is whether we like it or not, he's the premier superhero cartoonist. Of the '90s. If you look at the definition of what a cartoonist is, it's not supposed to be about drawing feet accurately. It's about drawing an exaggerated image that has the point of that particular genre you're trying to put into. And he did that perfectly in 91, 92, 93. We all loved all the teenagers liked this stuff. I mean,
and I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see you praising him, because it's so easy for people to tear Rob's art apart.
But
it doesn't take any.
But then they missed the point of what a cartoonist does.
Yeah. And really what he and the other image writers, artists, creators did for the industry, they turned into artists and writers into rock stars. And that was
they made it like it's cool to do comics, basically. Before that, it was, it wasn't really seen as cool. I mean, Stan did his best. Stanley did his best to make it cool, but he was still more of a grandpa figure. These guys made it like young and awesome to be a comic artist.
And I would still even say, with all his effort outside of the fans, outside of people who are aware of comic books, Stan Lee was, people going to walk right by him and not have a clue. And now I think statistically he is the highest grossing actor in all of history.
Yeah, if you add the IMDb up,
that's right. Yeah, right. If you add his IMDb up, he becomes the most bankable movie star in history because of his appearances. Technically,
if you by that sort of system of calculation, it would amount to that. Yeah,
and I don't think when he was making his appearances in a trial of the Incredible Hulk or people, I don't think anyone was going, "Oh, that's Stan Lee. That's Stan Lee."
I mean, Jack Kirby had an appearance in one of those Incredible Hulk shows as a police sketch artist. None of us, and only the fans who were diehard would know.
Right.
Have you seen that clip before?
I no, actually, I haven't. Okay,
but I definitely will send you a link to it. I posted it. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
And now these are names that are widely known by almost everyone. I mean, how cool is it? I think that we're living at a time where we're not just celebrating Batman, Superman, but we have Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy.
We're living our dream in the '80s. It's finally happening from a movie perspective. Yeah, for sure. And that's that whole thing of transferring the superhero genre over to TV and film. There's a whole concept there, as far as in my book there, of the success of that. And once that transfer happened, and then how then the comic book marketplace, the industry then starts shifting around toward viability in the movie world. and then that's then reciprocating some viability as still comics. It's not exactly a fix to the problem of a reduced readership, but it's part of a lifeline that keeps it relevant still.
Do you think economically? Do you think there is an answer to readership and improving the numbers?
That's an interesting question. You know, a lot. You know, it's all about competing media, right? And so in the 50s, once TV was like big, people weren't reading as many comics as they were in the 40s. That's just the way it is, and there was no way to change that. And the one edge they had in the 50s though was that science fiction based comics, science fiction superheroes. This I do talk about in the book. Science fiction based superheroes, they had an edge in comics because you could draw anything you want.
Sure,
with a low budget, you know,
only limited by the ability of the artist and the writer, rather than some kind of
but what do they have on TV in in the early 50s? Captain Video is lame, so it's some little kid with a helmet going, gee willikers, with a fake window behind him of stars.
Yeah,
so there's no contest there, so they have that edge. There's a competing mechanism, but as the special effects and the After Effects program by Adobe makes it easier and cheaper to make special effects and green screen technology, which anyone can do now, those kind of things then become harder and harder to compete against. So the readership's going to naturally dwindle. And I think what ends up becoming the case is them providing a lifeline of storyboarding for movie concepts. And that's where then, it's worth Disney's and Disney's time to keep Marvel Comics alive, to storyboard more ideas, test it out in the marketplace, see what kind of run. Secret Invasion. Okay, cool. Let's make that. All right, cool. That registered. There's a nice blip there. All right, what was that? Secret. All right, cool. Miniseries coming out soon. So now that's how you test out ideas. It's a great way to test out storyboards with an audience. Comics, right?
Yeah, especially when they own the source material. Then it's in-house. Marvel is what.
So if you have a multimedia system, multimedia corporation, conglomerate like Disney, you can use the comic book division to do those things and test market ideas and test market stories. And that's what now the role of it kind of becomes in some sense.
So we as a comic book historian, you've been seeing this this remarkable change in storytelling, remarkable change in the way the medium has presented everything from the golden age through the modern age.
Yeah.
As you go through, is there a particular era that really stands out to you? Say, you know what, that's just wildly entertaining, or this is where you fell in love with comics?
Yeah, I mean, I fell in love with comics during the, more in the dark age of comics, which is like 80s, well, kind of like the Crisis on Infinite Earths, to leading up through to Watchmen and Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. That's when I start reading, right? Because I'm your age. I'm 9 or 10 at that point. So but that being said, then I read trade paperbacks and I follow with Marvel Masterworks and I follow with the Silver Age stuff without really knowing that it was Silver Age stuff. I just thought it was part of a continuous story. But again, I love the old Fantastic Fours. I love X-Men 1 through 10, 1 through 20, all that stuff, and the Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and the Steve Ditko. All the Spider-Man start becoming fun. So. But the entry point was 87 for me.
Is that where you started? That's the time you started getting to.
Well, that's when I start going to. That's when I start spending my allowance every week on comics, right?
And you were going for the darker books. You were going for like Dark Knight.
It's more because like my friends are like, "Oh, you got to read this. This is awesome, right?" And then you get into that, but then you kind of then become curious, like, who are these characters? And you start reading the older stuff. You start going to back issues, and you're like, "Whoa, I don't have to wait for next week's comics. I can there's like thousands of old stuff to read."
That's right.
And so that becomes fun. And then of course you look at the John Byrne X-Men and the Chris Claremont X-Men, right? All that stuff, and Dave Cockrum, and then it starts going back into the 60s. Now you start getting curious about DC in the 60s, DC in the 50s, so you work your way back, right? And that's kind of what I did.
And all the way to the Golden Age, and even in prior, did you go? How far back is the superhero account in your book going? Are you?
Okay. So we're talking about my book then. Yeah. So
let's do that.
Yeah. So
we'll ease into the book.
Let's ease into that based on that question. Yeah. It goes back to Platinum Age and a little bit into the Victorian Age stuff, just to kind of. So there's two converging things that happens. Is first it's the history of the medium itself, and then it's the genesis of the superhero and pre-existing factors that work into creating the first official superhero and the father of the superhero genre, which is Superman, right? Action Comics 1. But there's a lot of pre-existing proto superheroes before that. What are those elements that come together? what were some of the actors that the Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were looking at? Well, Douglas Fairbanks, you got Errol Flynn, all these guys. Then Hal Foster's Tarzan. So who was playing Tarzan during the time? Well, that was Buster Crabbe, and you have Johnny Weissmuller and all those guys. And what was Bob Kane looking at? And Bob Kane and Bill Finger, of course. But yeah. Bob Kane mentions it. He's quoted because Bill Finger was dead by the time a lot of interviews were going on. But Bob Kane mentions, they were looking at Bela Lugosi's Dracula when they were looking at that stuff, and they were, and they were looking at Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, for the Hulk, Stanley and Jack Kirby. I have quotes and all cited that they were looking at Boris Karloff as Frankenstein for that. So there's this pre-existing elements, whether they're monsters, heroes, whatever, and then all that stuff coming together to form, pulp magazines. And who are those characters in the pulp magazines and the Shadow and all that coming together to create the first superhero. Then the industry changes, and what happens when Superman's a success, a viable economic success? You have copycat characters, and Batman they were like, sure, Bob Kane, you have a character, okay. Then he goes and with Bill Finger brings back Batman. Vince Sullivan for Detective Comics 27, I think, then ends up buying the character, not buying it, but Bob Kane was savvy with how he negotiated that deal. But yeah, then Batman comes out, Wonder Woman comes out, whatever. And then there's other people in the industry too. You got Fawcett Comics with Captain Marvel, right? So you have this golden age. The war comes and goes, and then you have DC kind of suing competing companies that were trying to do the superhero too. You have Captain Marvel getting kind of sued out of existence, and then they also had another guy, Masterman, that they kind of sent a cease and desist letter on. Wonder Man by Victor Fox Publications that Will Eisner kind of did to copy Superman, basically. But
sure,
they were basically like, they thought they owned the genre because it wasn't even legally protected as a genre at that point. It was just a story character.
So when you mentioned the pulp heroes and the pulp heroes, I'm a huge Phantom fan. I love the Phantom.
Oh, yeah, I love the Phantom. Lee Falk, I love the way he writes.
Yeah, right. People debate sometimes, and I know your book deals with controversy.
Yeah, is the Phantom a superhero?
There you go. Right.
So technically, but it's not really. Now, okay, the way I define it and all that, I actually source other books too on this. I source other books that I've also done some discussion. And so my friend Pete Coogan wrote a book, Superhero, Origin of a Genre. And I agree with his take, and I cite him in there but I have some of my own reasons, is that, you have to have a superpower, you have to have or some sort of super ability, some sort of code name and costume, and some sort of mission for justice. Okay. So you have to have those three elements in place to be considered a superhero. Tarzan, I don't think he has the costume and code name, really. He's just a guerrilla guy or whatever. And he's a jungle action hero, and that's technically another genre by itself. So if Phantom, does he have a super ability? Does he have a mission for justice? I don't know if you could really quite call it. Maybe it is a mission for justice. I mean, he certainly fights jerks that are in the jungle. He definitely has a costume and code name for sure. But did he then cause other companies to copy him? No, he didn't do that. And that's what seems to be missing. See, what I define in my thing is that there's an industrial change as a product of something. And if the industry then starts copying that, boom, that's the hit. It doesn't matter, there's no new concept under the sun anywhere. Everything is a copy of something else.
Sure.
But if it resonated enough where everyone's buying it and everyone's copying that, that's the nexus point of that particular characteristic we're talking about. And that's how I look at it, as a certain viability and a certain industrial change where there's a huge monetary significance, and everyone's going, and and audiences are going nuts over it, and they're going nuts over copies of it. And that there's a lot that then. So
and Phantom really,
like, you need that. Phantom doesn't. Yeah,
it didn't pull that.
I love Mandrake too, right? And that's another Lee Falk character, and he's got a cape, he's got powers. You can kind of think of him as a superhero. You don't know if those were illusions or hypnosis, whatever the hell he was doing, but it's not like everyone else was like now copying that.
Yeah, we gotta put that guy in a purple suit now
Yeah.
because of Phantom, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like Phantom. Okay, well, where's our guy for that?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No, but when Will Eisner did the Spirit, it was more to create a newspaper comic book type insert in that news to copy what Superman and them were doing. So it
Mhm.
wasn't really to copy Phantom. So that's what's missing. That's part of my characteristic.
And reasonably so. I mean, Superman does Action Comics #1 does start a catalyst. It starts everything. Starts the ball moving on an
Yeah,
entire
right.
medium.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
and there's
superheroes.
a narrative history of why, you know, um, yeah, I'm putting together the narrative history of why then the other companies stopped trying to copy Superman. Well, one of the reasons was they were getting sued when they
Hmm.
tried. And if
Yeah.
they were good at it, for sure lawyers were coming after them. Okay, so that's one reason. But then they didn't have to. They were free to do other genres, and other genres were popular after the war, crime and horror and whatever else.
And
But then if you don't,
westerns and romance,
yeah,
right?
westerns, romance, there's all sorts of other
Yeah.
stuff. But then, then that gets abused because if you can't show a guy doing crazy stuff with a cape on you might as well show a lady
Mhm.
getting decapitated because that's going to grab someone, right? Well, unfortunately, then that creates its own set of problems,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And now, if people can't copy superheroes and they can't really go nuts on other genres, and now TV's taking a lot of the crowd, well, how do you survive? And now you have a lot of things going away, a lot of companies dying off, and then you have, DC doing fine. Uh,
Hmm.
but but then you have the problem of, and Marvel kind of getting by on copying stuff. But and some other companies, I mean, it wasn't like the whole thing fell apart. Um, so yeah. So at any rate, there's a whole narrative history of how then the industry is changing and how the money is changing and how the trends are changing and all these things start to define each age of the comics industry and especially the viability of superheroes and who's keeping superheroes relevant. You can't just make the same 1938 Superman and hope
Hmm.
that that's going to stay okay for 100 years. You have to adapt the superhero. Who were the people that then adapted it, kept it viable over the years and over the decades?
So
And
on that note, talking about the people that have really made these characters what they are on the page, there's undoubtedly at some point, whether someone's listening to this or someone's going to the local comic book shop, someone is picking up a comic book for their first time. This
yeah,
some
yeah,
comic book, whether it's if they're buying a reprint of Action Comics #1 or they're joining Action Comics 1051,
yeah,
2,
yeah, yeah.
whatever. It's somebody's first. So in this entire span, now we're talking about decades now. And I know you're a product of the '80s as much as I am.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there particular and you are an immensely knowledgeable person?
Well,
Are
that's
there
nice.
any creators or comic runs that you would recommend to someone who has seen a superhero film but never picked up a book before and would really be interested in jumping into the genre?
Well, it's interesting. You know, every decade pretty much has its pioneers that innovated in a new way. Um, and part of that question then becomes what generation are they?
Hmm.
Because a lot of it's going to be relevant to the comic that's coming out now for someone that's 12. I don't know how interested they'll be in 80s stuff that we love because in the 80s
Sure.
that was the cool thing at that point. So that becomes a bit of a funny question. But if you're going to look at like, who are the icons that if you're interested
Mhm.
in the whole thing, when you talk about jumping in, you really should just look at what's a cool new thing at that moment. But if you're talking about,
I
if you
have
really
I have no Ant-Man recommendations. I have none. I don't think I've ever read an Ant-Man comic in my life. So,
Yeah, I mean, I would
yeah.
say the one really good Ant-Man to read is in the Kree Skrull War, where Neil Adams draws Ant-Man going through the Vision's body, right? And you know what I'm talking about? It's like 1971 to 72, and Vision is knocked out on the ground, and Ant-Man goes into his
Mhm.
body, and Neil Adams draws this incredible montage of what's going on in Vision's interiors. That if there's a great Ant-Man adventure, that's it.
That's it. Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an Avengers comic, 90 something. I forget the
Oh, okay.
actual number.
Yeah.
But
I've never dived deep into a Ant-Man solo series. I've picked up issues here and there, but
Oh, well, there's
you know,
that one funny Ant-Man that I think he died, Eric O'Grady or whatever. He
yeah,
was like,
that's the only one, the
yeah,
irredeemable Ant-Man. That's the
irredeemable. I
only,
liked him
yeah,
because he
me
was an
me too.
asshole or whatever. Yeah,
Right, right. It was
yeah,
yeah, it was interesting.
yeah, yeah,
And he had a lot of memorable
yeah,
moments in that
yeah. I
series.
like that stuff
Yeah,
where the
but you're
bad
right. He
guy,
did. Yeah,
like,
he
kind
did
of a
die.
scoundrel. Yeah, and he died. I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
what? I just got
Yeah,
attacked
yeah.
by this guy.
He did die. I think he died a hero, though, right? I think he died trying to
Yeah,
save
something
people.
like that.
But that's part of the appeal, and I know you were just talking too on your account too about Jack Cole and Plastic
Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
and I always thought that one of the Plastic Man's more interesting aspects, other than his
Oh yeah,
unbelievable power, is the idea that he was a criminal prior to. He wears
yeah.
a mask to prevent people from realizing that he's Eel
Oh
O'Brien.
yeah, yeah.
I mean that's an amazing story too of his creator and
Yeah,
his
and
untimely
and
death.
and and Plastic Man's just such a unique thing. He's kind of like Deadpool before there was a Deadpool, where
Mhm.
criminals can run him through a damn blender, right? And he's
Right.
gonna come out making jokes about it, and so he's kind of like he was like Deadpool for the golden age in a
Oh
sense.
yeah. Yeah. No,
Is how I
I
kind
agree.
of look at him.
It must be a blast to draw a Plastic Man. I mean, just doing
Right.
whatever you want, whenever you want. I always enjoy like scenes of him looking, going down the stairs like he is mirroring the stairs, even though he doesn't have to. But it just makes for a great visual.
Yeah,
Uh,
oh yeah, for sure.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I loved his cartoon in what, like the late 70s, early 80s. I
yeah.
I I I grew up on that cartoon, so
With
I
the
have a
live
soft
action
spot for it.
element to it. Oh no,
I
no,
don't know
no.
if
Yeah,
there was. I think it was
the,
just purely a
I think
cartoon, like
I'm thinking of
he would
something
turn
in the
into a
later.
tire for a car and stuff. I don't know.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think such an underrated character. So on that actually note, uh, that there are so many. I'm sure you've come across thousands in your research and in your continuous effort to put out amazing content on your YouTube channel, your
Oh,
Instagram,
thanks.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Are there seldom used characters, or just kind of like long dormant ones, maybe ones that have made their way into the public domain? Are there any kind of superheroes that you don't see more often that you would really like to see make a comeback?
Yeah, you know what I really liked? There was one series that gosh, I forgot who I think Alex Ross kind of curated it, but maybe it was by
Uh,
Dynamite Comics, but
right.
they brought back all these public domain
Yeah,
superheroes like the Golden
Daredevil.
Age Daredevil and all that
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I love that. And
Boy, I'm drawing a blank on the name too. I'm drawing a
yeah,
blank
I
on the name, but
forgot that, but I read all of those, even
oh
the
yeah.
companion books or whatever.
Mhm.
And I thought that was genius. If bring back those golden age guys. There's like two types of golden age characters. There's kind of the pre 1942 ones, and then there's the
Mhm.
post 1942 ones. It's, or maybe it's 1941. There, what happened was the pre 1940, like before World War II,
Right.
basically kind of hijacked the whole culture of comics. um they were more like pulp anti-hero
Mhm.
types. And you have Batman like breaking guys' necks in the window and doesn't care.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and you have, Superman going, ha ha ha, as a bad guy chokes to his own
It's-
poison.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
uh, you know,
Good for
y-
him.
yeah, that's what he gets. And,
Right. Right.
and then the Submariner, like crushes those guys' heads, in the first issue
Mm.
of Marvel Comics 1, where he's crushing their heads, those, their little, and then he's like literally got an axe and hatcheting cops in this. And it's like, holy crap,
Yeah.
these guys are nuts. And then
Eh,
then something
right.
happens in like 41 or 42. Well, on the DC end, Whitney Ellsworth released my friend Ken Quattro is a great comics historian, like the Apex comics historian. And I acknowledge him. He's in my acknowledgments. And he showed this memo that Whitney Ellsworth released in like 41ish, late 41, where he says, okay, guys, enough with the murder and all that stuff. We have to appeal to kids or they'll shut us down, basically,
Mhm.
is what
No,
the ideal is. And,
smart man.
and it was a smart move. And then
Yeah.
it becomes more kid friendly. And that's a different kind of golden age. And we're lumping it together as a golden age, but
I
there's almost
understand
like
that.
this
Right.
more pulp relevant golden age, which was like from 38 to like 41 and like early 41. And then
Right.
after
Where
that,
they're more vigilante than
yeah, they're more
hero.
vigilante than they are
Right.
superhero. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more superhero idealized.
Mhm.
And it's like, so Batman would never use a gun.
Yeah. Right.
It's
I
like,
mean,
oh, he used a
you got
machine gun,
you
early
got
on.
these covers with Batman with a Gatling gun on the cover
Yeah.
at the time, and,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then by the 50s they're like super cops, almost indistinguishable
Yeah, I
from each
mean,
other.
really, even by 1942 or 43, I mean,
Mhm.
it's still got some angst, but no, by 43, it's like pretty much.
Right.
He's, if you look at the comic strip, they even make a joke about that. Like of the Batman dailies, it was like, I don't know if it was 44, I forget the exact year, but you see he's like more fun with Robin. But then he was like, "Hey, Robin, looks like we got to go old school on this." And then you see him hiding in the shadows, grabbing a guy without knowing it, scaring the crap out of him. But anyway, he goes, "Woo! It was nice kind of doing that old trick again." So they're even making jokes
That's
about
perfect.
that. Even not even I mean mid 40s, they were making jokes about that.
Yeah. So on that as well as a little segue into that, we had talked about Adam West before. We're talking about Michael Keaton. Now we're talking
Yeah,
about kind of golden age,
yeah,
pulp kind of vigilante Batman. Then the kind of neutered
yeah.
Batman, kind of really,
And that's how
so
I look at it. And we both
yeah,
look at it like that because we're a product of the later 80s, where
right,
Frank Miller's Batman and all that. We look at that as neutered. We
yeah, oh
Our
yeah,
generation looks at it as neutered. But the we're Generation X though. And the baby boomers look at it as that's the Batman of my childhood. And
hmm
and that's Zebra Batman is sings to my 10-year-old heart. And I'm like, Zebra
yeah,
Batman,
right,
and Superman, with the Weisinger Superman with like these rainbows shooting out of his hands. And it's
hmm
like, huh? Like that.
yeah, yeah.
What is that? But the boomers love that stuff. And that's fine. Whatever. It's all about what you grew up with in the end of the
hmm
day.
I think I at one point hit that as in, boy, I mean, I noticed that Batman was just getting darker and darker. I don't know if you saw the Batman, which came out last year. I
Yeah, I saw it.
remember
I liked it.
watching. Oh yeah, I did as well. But I remember at one point watching with my son. There was a scene where these Joker-esque gang was beating someone up on a subway, and it's Batman's real first on-screen introduction, and you could hear the thudding of his feet and the music, and they're staring into the darkness. And I said to my son, I said, I think this is a horror movie. It
Right.
feels. I mean, how dark. I mean,
But
he's
the
getting
first Batman issues were like that. The Detective
right, right.
Comic
Yeah.
27 and to
I
with
mean, how
like
many
the
people
first
does he
14
kill in the
issues,
first issue? Yeah,
they were
yeah.
doing that stuff.
I think he killed what, 3 people in like the first issue, hanging from a helicopter,
Yeah,
dropping
I
into a vat
forgot.
of acid.
I would have to. Well, the Vat
Yeah,
of Acid. Yeah, yeah, right. A fitting
yeah.
end for his kind. Yeah,
right, right. Damn,
and then
Batman. Yeah.
Doctor Death was burned to death, and he was like, "Ah, yes, death to Doctor Death." But
Yeah.
then Doctor Death then comes back in the next issue, just burnt. But
Well,
there was an intent to kill that character still.
yeah.
Um,
I think at one point I kind of hit like I hit the Gen X mode where I said, oh, you know what? I mean, like you said, I grew up with Batman 66. I thought in the reruns I wasn't knowledgeable enough. I had no idea what a rerun was.
yeah, I didn't know
I
that they
thought,
were reruns at the time either.
yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it was just happening.
yeah, same here. Yeah,
Right, and then you see interviews with
yeah,
Adam West. You're like, he looks different.
yeah. I mean, well, we were like 10 or 11 or something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always enjoyed that blissful ignorance that I did not know that
it's kind of nice.
Gilligan had got off the island
Yeah.
years ago. I had no idea. I thought he was still stuck there. That poor little man.
No, yeah, and I remember like I saw like a rerun of like a 70s movie where they were found and then they end up on the
yeah,
island again at the end. But I remember I'm like, oh, I said to my grandparents, they're finally saved. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know if they didn't tell me that. No, this was 10 years ago. I mean, that
Right.
show was already this has happened.
I can
No one
picture
ever told
them
me that. My
just
parents never told me that.
no. It was a lie. It was all a lie. They hid it from us. They hid it from us.
You
But
know what? It's
go
like
ahead.
life is beautiful, right? They don't want to ruin their kids'
Right. Right.
innocence, right? And but I mean, a silly version of that, yeah.
No, I agree with you. But you know what? I don't mind the silly version sometimes too of Batman. I really, I think my own children. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they were just kind of getting into superheroes when Batman: The Brave and the Bold, the animated series came
That's
on,
a great
which
show.
totally embraced. Oh, so. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
as an
definitely it
adult
embraced
nerd,
it embraced
the silliness, right? Yeah,
the Jack Schiff
yeah,
era of Batman, right? And
right.
that's what that was.
And that was a lot of fun. So I'm okay with a light night every now and again
Yeah,
for the Dark Knight.
yeah. Well, that's what they call that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think sometimes when they refer to Adam West, the Light Knight,
yeah.
the,
They do
the
say
light.
something along those.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. And yeah,
I'm
he
okay
is
with
the quintessential version of that. Yes.
right. Uh, so I mean, but there's the darker side too. The darker side of the industry as well, and the comic book industry, like any other industry, is no stranger to controversy. And your new book is really going to dive into the dark, I'll assume spandex covered underbelly of the comic book industry.
Yeah, I mean that's a way to put it.
It
It's all
yeah.
about what are some of the hard things that happened that also kept the superhero comic book viable to the marketplace, on a personal level, right?
And you're talking more towards the creator aspect.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things that, yeah, like, there is some mention of, when, Arnold Drake and John Broom and some of those other guys, they tried to start a union with Jack Leibowitz, and then they got replaced by young fans that loved the characters more than the creators that made them, right?
Hmm.
And that happens. That whole era, is full of that kind of stuff. I mean, it still kind of is, but it was more then because those are the guys that actually made the characters, so it's
Right.
a little more personal to them. So that there's some element of that. There's also the whole thing of the Jack Stan and Steve Ditko stuff, because there's a whole analysis on why the Marvel Revolution was as important as it was, because how are you going to talk about superheroes and not talk about the Marvel Revolution? It doesn't make sense to not talk
Hmm.
about it. But how it was more, but there's also before that, there's a whole EC Comics and Fred Wortham aspect, and how that changes the industry, and how it almost forces Julius Schwartz to kind of bring back the superhero, because that's all they could really, try to monetize in some
Hmm.
meaningful. I mean, they could do other things, funny animals, other things, but I'm talking about keeping their industry viable. They need sales, and you can't do Knights and Robin Hood forever, so you have to have something. And he does he modernizes it with in his way by creating relatable, more believable science fiction, more relatable characters. Like, remember when Flash, look, when Superman was like doing all this stuff, he was pretty cocky about what he did in the Golden Age, and so was
Hmm.
Batman. And there's really no like over analysis on why these things are happening. They were just doing their thing. More simple characters. They're the standard superhero idealism. But then you have relatability with Julius Schwartz, which
Right.
is, like alter egos, human alter egos. Like Barry Allen is a forensics guy, and
Hmm.
hard water inhalation of the Golden Age. That doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's
Jake
silly.
Garrick, hard water. Hard water. I don't
Yeah,
understand.
it doesn't. It's silly and stupid. But
I've been
and even
drinking water.
Julius
I've
Schwartz.
never
I
said it
mean,
forever.
yeah, I mean, even Julius Schwartz said that was silly,
Yeah.
but Gardner Fox came up with that, but he made up for it with Flash of Two Worlds, when he
Oh
did that.
yeah.
I
Right.
mean, he made, Gardner Fox was incredibly talented. There's a whole pulp analysis of his roots and what he did. But back to Julius Schwartz, he when he was editing stuff, he's like, look, we got to make this stuff relatable. No more Justice
Hmm.
Society. Let's make it a league because it's more like a informal thing. Let's have these guys. Let's have Hal Jordan as a test pilot, but look how when they discovered their powers, they were discovering them with the reader. They
Yeah.
weren't so fully. Flash was like, man, look at that bullet going
Yeah.
so
Right.
slow.
Look
What's
at those
that
hot.
about?
Look at those hot dogs floating around.
Yeah, Zack Snyder did that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
hot
Yeah.
dogs are
Yeah.
wiggling in my nose so slowly. Okay, so all that stuff, there's a whole that's a relatability that I attribute more to Julius Schwartz and his line
Mm.
of comics. And then even when he took over Batman, it wasn't about going to silly planets and zebra Batman. It was, let's make him a detective. Let's
Right.
make it more realistic.
So
That
no more
relatability is
Batman.
bad.
No more
Yeah,
Batman's are in it's let's get back to serious, or
yeah.
at least
Let's solve a
not as
mystery.
right,
Yeah,
right. Let's be
let's solve a
Detective Batman.
mystery. Who done it?
Hmm.
And so that's the whole new look Batman. And and then the rest of the guys start doing stuff that's relatable. You got Mort Weisinger with the Lois Lane girlfriend.
Hmm.
Let's bring it back to the human element. Okay, there's a human element here, and a relatable human element, and that's important. And then when it all culminates into the Justice League, then there is a reflection on
Hmm.
the Marvel end where they're like, look, we got to start getting on these superhero thing. What do you think? Stan, can you do it? And he couldn't have done it, without Ditko and Kirby. They're the guy, they were the guys that knew
Okay.
how to draw haggard, uncomfortable characters. Okay.
Yeah.
They could draw uncomfortable character. They can create anxiety monsters, monstrousness. If you look at that stuff, there's no way that, you know, so Stan's trend, but his trend toward realism was more advanced in Julius Schwartz. It was about flawed superheroes. That was his whole thing.
Yes.
Imperfect
Right.
superheroes, flaws. Let's have them care about dandruff. Let's make them kind of tempted by stuff, and let's
Mhm.
and that was definitely a Stan factor, I think. But I think it was because he was working with those guys specifically. But that was more his factor. You know, when they went off, they did more idealized things again. Space gods on Kirby's end, and
Okay.
good and evil. Mr. A, you know, is, you know, and it's black and white, you know. But Stan kept the bullpen working on realism and flaws and make them angry, make them upset, make them have a little more bite to it. So, you know, he does advance it. I can't say he's not the grand creator. You know, I think those other guys were more in character creation. But
Sure.
that being said, he made those characters, you know, he made kids like reading that
Right.
stuff.
He brought that a different kind of appeal to the
Yeah,
characterization.
yeah,
Right.
it's
Right.
like Spider-Man is worried about rent and he's got a cold and he's got, you know, so you know, and then the whole Marvel Revolution of how that intermixes, and then some of the controversy of, you know, who created what and what exactly happened. And if you look at all the quotes of what each one says, I leave it up to the judgment of the reader, but there is an element of once you're one of the lessons, there's lessons throughout this narrative history and the trend toward increasing realism in superheroes. There's also these lessons of creators and what they've done to each other. And one of the lessons is when people come together and they create a popular property, then they're going to argue with who really did it, who really created it. Like, it's almost this weird inevitability. And those three guys are a prime example of that. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, but then there's lessons throughout this book as it goes through this trend toward the genesis of the superhero and its increasing trend toward realism. And then you have Jim Starlin come in. You know, why did Thanos succeed whereas Darkseid didn't? And really, Thanos, he brings, and Starlin brings, a fear of death in the
Yeah.
risk.
Oh yeah.
He adds a fear of death to the risk of the superhero adventure story, right? Thanos, people were dying, characters were dying, but whole planets are dying, and they
Mm.
can't stop it. Okay, all they could do, Starlin's stories, and I have this whole thing mapped out with him. He's a genius. I love him. His stuff is all superheroes can do is minimize death. They can't stop it. It's going to happen. They can only minimize it. And by creating a certain powerlessness to the superhero and a fear to the reader, like remember when Infinity Gauntlet came out? Holy crap!
Yeah.
Half
Oh
of
yeah.
them are dead. Like what?
Right.
And that, you know, that, so he introduces a fear of death, and that's what's more relatable than the fear of death. We all relate to that. And what's more realistic than the fear of death? So that's a whole, and that's why that's so successful. That's why people reacted to it. That's why the whole MCU phase 1 through 3 are based on it,
Yeah.
because the fear of death is real. And so that's a realistic take. It's an addition of realism as the superhero is progressing over time. And then, you know, and then you have now another lesson in it is the John Byrne approach. And John Byrne superhero comics, I don't know if you remember, but when John Byrne stuff was coming out in the 80s, it was a big deal. You remember that?
Yeah. I read a lot of the Wonder Woman.
Yeah, right. His Wonder
Right.
Woman.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that George Perez's Wonder Woman, I tend to like more than John Byrne's. But
Right.
that being said, John Byrne's X-Men, if you look at John Byrne's Fantastic Four, a lot of it, and even John Byrne's Superman, a lot of it is
That's right.
revisiting.
Yep.
It's revisiting aspects of the old stuff, but making it modern and fresh for people like us to like it. So he introduces
Mhm.
this aspect, like, you don't necessarily have to degrade the superhero. You can actually just modernize it and make it fresh for a new audience. And John Byrne, there's a whole John Byrne section of how he does that and how that approach keeps the superhero comic book viable for new generations. Like if you can
Oh
get
yeah.
someone that comes in, Scott Snyder on Batman, make it fresh and new, you
Mhm.
know, and if you can modernize it successfully, you know, that's primo real estate for a comic book company. So, and John Byrne did that in the 80s with a lot of these characters. He brought back a certain aspect of the old stuff, but then made it fresh and new. But if you go toward, so that's another narrative consequence. But with that, then also comes a replacement of the old guard, which is a sad thing. You know, you
Mhm.
have, as Jack Kirby was kind of dying out, John Byrne's coming in and getting, more popular. So there's a changing of the guard, and these things are just kind of sad truths, but that's the only way you're going to keep comics relevant.
Well,
You can't just make dated stuff. You got to make it fresh.
but Jack Kirby will undoubtedly be always undeniably the king of comic books.
Well, he is the king of comics.
Right.
He created more characters than anyone did.
And
If you look at, I mean, what John Byrne modernized a lot of that stuff,
Mhm.
but really, it's Kirby that created a lot of stuff that John Byrne was modernizing, right?
So if he's going to be the king,
Yeah.
if he's the king, and if there's more people, not like a Mount Rushmore, but really like if you were making a royal family of comic book creators, and Jack is the king, who else would you put on that pedestal? Who else would sit adjacent on the throne with Jack Kirby?
Oh yeah, well, Steve Ditko for me.
Mhm.
The things he did with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. You could argue that Spider-Man trumps all the stuff that Kirby did at Marvel. You could almost say that because
Right.
that's the company mascot. But that being
It's
said,
sales and popularity, right?
sales and popularity of the mascot. I mean
Yeah.
that face. I mean by itself,
Yeah, right.
is huge. Okay. Now again, Stan's dialogue helped seal that deal, but that visual creation is 100% Ditko in my opinion. And
So we got
so you have to put that there. I mean, he's our Spider-Man surpassed Superman in like the 70s. He was, and he's never looked back. I mean, there's something to that. So Steve
Mhm.
Ditko would have to go up there. If you look at, I feel like Julius Schwartz should be up there for what he oversaw and edited and did. He didn't take credit as a creator like Stan did, doing the same thing, kind of the same thing. Stan wrote the dialogue though, so but
I don't think anyone takes credit like Stan takes credit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but Julius Schwartz almost took less credit for what he did. So he would go up there in the DC end, but there are some problematic things because of his, there's some reports of his treatment of women in the 80s that wasn't very good.
Okay.
And that tarnishes a reputation. But if you were like when I interviewed Paul Levitz, I'm like, well, Julius Schwartz, he goes, look, if you just look at what he did in the 50s and 60s alone, it's like such a big deal for DC because he kept DC relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Their superheroes relevant. That's a big deal. But he phrased it like that. He phrased it like if you just look at
and you have to stop there. Yeah, right.
But look, he did good stuff for Superman in the 70s too. It's just once you go into the 80s and some of the problematic behavior starts popping in, then you got to be careful with how you phrase that. But because it is wrong, some of those things that were done. But again, Julius Schwartz would go up there. If you just look at his career in the 50s and 60s, there's also some contrasting elements between Schwartz and Stan Lee. There is an Eisenhower era quality to the conformity of the DC superhero of the 50s, where they all sounded the same. It's not like you can really separate them all out. You separate them by their costume.
At one point, Green Arrow, and Batman are essentially the same character in different costumes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you could interchange those lines easily.
Right.
But with Stan, each character was different, and there was a diverse voice to those characters, and that is that's part of that JFK era of just it's a brand new world. What could we do? And that's different. And so there's these little contrasts, these little things, these observations that I kind of throw in through this narrative history, these layers that are all kind of come together. And then of course after the John Byrne modernization, but on the arc of the superhero narrative, the genre and its narrative course, it's Alan Moore, Frank Miller to some extent, but Alan Moore, I mean, what did he do? He deconstructed superhero how? By adding selfishness, self-involvement in a massive way to like all those characters in some way. And whether it's Dr. Manhattan being just apathetic to the human condition, doesn't really care, or if it was a comedian really enjoying murdering people or raping them or whatever. I mean, what's he saying about Superman and Captain America with both of those characters? So there is a selfishness that gets introduced in this arc of the superhero realism story, idealism in the Golden Age, relatability in the early Silver Age, flaws, fear of death, and then selfishness. And if you look at this arc, this is like an arc of human degradation in a sense. Like if we're like when COVID happened, we're all afraid of dying. what did everyone do to the grocery stores? It was just horrible. Like,
Right.
but
Right.
this is what happens once fear of death is introduced. Selfishness comes next, and
I had listen. I had to get my Tang. I had to
you have
get
to get, yeah, and we all needed toilet paper, right? But
and toilet paper, but
so
mostly Tang.
so that's what I mean is there's this arc to these. So as this narrative history is talking about and these different interactions and different people and what happens to all of them, you know, and the destiny of these characters and the Jack Schiff and what he did with Jack Kirby, kind of blackballing him at DC and all that stuff is kind of intertwined into this history along with the narrative course of what happens with the superhero over time. And then how in the 90s, you know, the extreme age of comics, it's not like they made things cool, as you and I have talked about before. Yeah. But what did that really do as far as those narrative elements that we've already discussed? Well, really, what they did was they summoned a lot of that stuff that was pioneered before. They would kill someone off. They would have someone rape somebody. They would have someone, worry about losing hair. They would have someone have a realistic science fiction, origin, or they would have someone be idealistic. They were interchanging a lot of those pioneered elements by those guys, but making it super extreme and like really intense. So it was more of an exaggerated version of what those other guys kind of pioneered as far as superhero narrative elements. And then after that, then it's like the superheroes kind of now the superhero industry, I think superhero comic book industry is kind of relying on the John Byrne technique. Let's try to keep modernizing it. Let's keep it relevant. Let's keep it relative to new people. But really the genre really is moving sideways. And by sideways, I said that in my video. What does sideways mean? It means that it's not really advancing in the comics so much, but it is shifting media from the superheroes shifting from superheroes to TV and film. And that's where it's kind of going. And then repeating a lot of those things, but now in a new medium, because it's basically growing sideways at this point.
Right.
And then what happened to everybody, like all these people died. Well, how'd they die? A lot of heart attacks and a lot of cancer and all sorts of things. But it's interesting. So there's a whole element of, how they all went and the character, because it's all very creator driven, this history here.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, what happened to him? And there's, I like to have an ending to it. And the ending I thought of was the medical mechanisms of their death. I found that just kind of an interesting way to end each person's story, because that's how all of our stories end. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a remote. Oh, sorry. Oh, you never mind. Okay. Sorry, I'm hearing myself, but I think it just might be me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't hear you twice. You sound fine.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you. Sorry, throw me off. So, I mean, this is you really do a remarkable and in-depth study into each of these creators and their backgrounds, their contributions to the comic book industry.
Right.
Is there any plan with this book coming out in June, and it's available for pre-order now? Is there any plan to promote the book, tour, go to cons, go to book shows?
Yeah. I was just talking to the publisher, McFarland. Yeah, I think they're going to be at Dragon Con, and I'm going to kind of see what's going on with that. I'm going to Comic Con. I do. I tend to do panels every year there, and so I did a panel last year, and there's one that we have in mind now that we have to wait for approval on, but. So I'll see, and then if that gets approved and I end up going, then I'll contact the publisher and see, what would be the thing to do. What I like about it is I'll have books, with me, of course, because if it's coming out in June and Comic-Con's in July, that works out pretty good.
Right.
And then some of the publisher was really great, by the way.
I bet.
When I first submitted it, it was in a pretty rough, raw form. I mean, I'd never done anything like this before. I was writing for my website, but when the managing editor there really saw something in it, and she was like, I like what I'm seeing, but we got to change form. We got to I want you to work on this, and I did. I listened to everything she said, and my buddy Scott, he's a PhD, and he's done his thesis as a PhD, and he grades papers as a college professor now in music, but he grades papers. And I was like, look, we're buddies, and I'm a what do you think about overseeing me? And it really turned into like a Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi session on format, and
not in training, not in martial arts training.
Yeah,
No.
exactly.
Right,
No, it
right.
was more like Karate Kid 3. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
Um,
no, no,
no,
sure.
it
Hilary
but no,
Swank.
it was definitely in format like citations, Chicago style endnotes, bibliography, citing things and learning that whole format. And then also, then the feedback, like, look, I like the argument you're making, but I'm not getting that from this. Think about
Mhm.
what you're trying to say and say, think about like and he would give me this feedback and be like, all right, now you got to go do it over again. And then show it to me
Right.
tomorrow. I'm like, okay. So it was a real intense thing, but it was a personal growth. As a writer, it was a big deal for me. I mean, I
Yeah.
started thinking in ways that I did not know I was going to get into when I first got into it. But it was definitely you know, it was an evolution. It was like almost like Jim Starlin, right? When Captain Marvel gets the cosmic consciousness, there was some element of that, but just a more painful version of it. But yeah.
So that's amazing. I really can't wait to you doing San Diego? Any plans to travel things like New York
Well,
or
yeah.
I guess we'll
So,
see.
yeah, definitely. So Scott and I, I think we're going to go to Dragon Con for sure.
Okay.
San Diego, we're definitely going to. New York, yeah, I've been planning on that for a while. This would be a good excuse for me to go. I have a wife and two kids, so I have to kind of be somewhat. I have to be
Yeah, look,
cognizant of what's going on with
right,
them.
right. You can't just
Because
leave everything behind and
yeah,
travel the
and
world.
it's like,
Yeah.
and then if we go to New
Yeah.
York, do I just leave them in the hotel room and I just run
Yeah.
around?
Oh,
So
they'll love Comic Con. It's a family event.
so there's that, and we have a 3-year-old, so
Oh,
the 3-year-old,
congratulations.
so there always has to be some calculation. In
Sure.
San Diego, it works because we have an uncle there and it's visiting family. Dragon Con, I think I can make it work. It just everything has its circumstance with having a 3-year-old girl and my wife needing help with that. So
I understand.
that there's a little bit of that going on too. But definitely, like, my friend Bud Plant, he's a book dealer, and he lives close to me, and we get together every couple months and with some other comic pros. And there's book shows that are in
Hmm.
California that I go to, and
That's
with
great.
him. And so yeah, there's going to be things like that going on. Of course, the social media angle will, I'm going to hit that pretty hard.
Right.
I mean, I am already to some extent anyway. But more, more when it comes out, and look, with
Sure. Sure.
everything superhero comic book. Now, look, the one thing I do like about this is I showed this to 8 comic professionals already, and
Hmm.
I have their blurbs are on the Amazon pre-order. Have you ever seen any of those?
The Amazon pre-order. Yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
no, I didn't check out the blurbs yet. No, I'll be. Yeah.
Okay. If you look under the reviews, there's going to be 8 blurbs.
Hmm.
Jim Shooter's already read it and complimented it. And
Beautiful.
then Danny Fingeroth, Carl Potts, Tom DeFalco. They've already read it. They sent a glowing review that I've put up on or that McFarlane, the publisher, put up on the pre-order page on Amazon. You can see all those glowing reviews
Oh,
from
definitely
these
check it
guys.
out.
And Danny, he sent his. And after he sent it, he told me, he's like, he's like, I don't know how you did it, but you managed to bring together all these competing theories and stories about the superhero comic book and brought it together as one thing. And he goes,
Mhm.
look, I don't agree with all of it, but there's no way anyone could, because there's also
There's so
the
many
way you've brought
conflicting
it all together. There's no
stories.
way everyone's going to agree with every aspect of it, but
Right.
you actually did it. You actually brought it together in a way that made sense. And that was really nice of him to
Yeah,
say.
no, I mean, diving into comic book history and finding a cohesive way to present it, it's got to be an incredibly daunting task. So if you're able to pull that off and you're getting great reviews about it, then definitely speaks a lot about your
Yeah, yeah, by those
not only your
guys.
historical, but right, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and it speaks about your historical professionalism, but also your understanding of the genre itself,
yeah.
understanding the
Thanks.
meaning
Yeah,
of stuff. Oh yeah.
I would like to think so. Now again, that's from them. They're comic book pros. They've edited. They've overseen. They've written stuff.
Hmm.
And they've been in the industry and they know all the talk in the trade. And that's kind of how the perspective I'm coming from, because thankfully I've interviewed a lot of these guys, so that informed the way I was looking at this and writing a lot of this. That being said, how do fans feel about it? That's another story, right? I mean,
Yeah.
fans are interesting. There can be fans that they love the stuff, but then they'll say something like, "Oh, Jack Kirby's lame without Stan," and you're like, "Huh? I don't.
Hmm.
I just don't relate to that." And then there are other people that are the opposite. They'll say, "Well, Stanley never did a thing in his life," and I'm like, "Huh?" So
Yeah.
fans are
Right.
just, you never know what you so. And so, you know, I'd like to think I take an even keel in how I'm approaching it with the information at hand, and that's all I can really do, and try to bring it together in a way that's informative, but also makes sense from A to Z. That if you read it, it'll take you through the
Hmm.
process, and that was the overall mission of this thing.
And I'm sure you succeeded spectacularly.
Well, thanks. That's
Spe-
nice. I mean, I hope you feel that way. I hope you
oh
feel that
yeah,
when you look at it. I mean, it's you
I'll,
know,
I'll, I'll, I'll
McFarlane says it's 120 pages, but it's not. They haven't updated it. It's actually 283 pages of straight text, and then
wow.
there is another 40 pages of endnotes and bibliography and index
Mhm.
and stuff. So it's not short, but it's also not overly long either.
I see you rubbing your head as you're talking about the pagination of the book, and I'm going to imagine the dauntingness of it. Just as you, you know,
No, it was something, man. It was something.
I bet, I bet. I mean,
I
it's
did, I did,
impressive.
I'm glad it's done.
Mhm.
I'm glad I did the final edits the other day. I got the proof and did one more set of edits, and then me and Scott did the index, and we looked at the index and make sure, like, okay, is everything spelled right, yada yada, and
Oh yeah,
all the parentheses, you know, just even writing citations, is the parentheses in the right place, is the comma correct?
oh
You know,
gosh,
there's a lot to this. it's
yeah,
it's more than you would think.
sure, sure.
But and I'm really glad he was the editor on this. I mean, he was a big help to me, you know,
It sounds like it,
in having me look at it like the way a PhD would. That was
right?
good.
Well, it's good to have that extra set of eyes, especially from such a professional set of eyes on it. That
Yeah, yeah,
will
yeah,
be able to tell you, like, that comment doesn't belong there. That there should be a
yeah, yeah.
semicolon
And
there.
then there was
Yeah,
like some things that
never used a semicolon right
once
in my
once
life.
I got his voice in my head, I started
Mhm.
almost like hearing his voice. I was hearing his voice
Sure.
after a while.
Well, and then I'm sure at one point you guys are starting at different levels, but then you
Yeah,
converge.
yeah,
You
yeah,
are
yeah. Totally
all
converged.
eventually gonna,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
yeah. I
and
get you. I get you.
that's totally right. And even as I was going through it, I was like, I don't need those two sentences. I already kind of
Mhm.
said that, and I started
Right.
thinking that way. And so it's real tight now.
Well, I'm sure also producing the videos that you do for your YouTube channel and your has allowed you to from Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
You also you kind of say, all right, well, that's kind of extraneous. I don't particularly
Yeah.
need that
Yeah.
aspect.
I mean,
Let me
look, if you
get right
have
to the point here.
those videos were kind of, I look at them now as like my bookmarks of
Mhm.
information. Like, I made notes, I made a little video presentation. It's almost like a class. And back in 2015, I think I want to take it on as like almost like as like a graduate degree. Like those videos are my presentations for the class,
Mhm.
and then I still have my notes. I'm still looking at it. I'm still building on them, even though I'm not making new videos on that exact topic. But I have my notes. I built it up, and now it's like I can make my term paper on it now, right?
Right.
And that's what the book is, and that's kind of what it is for me personally, just as a comics and a historian, as far as advancing my own personal degree in this. And that's what happened there. And that's how the videos kind of relate to it. They're like my
Yeah.
little class presentation. Even though I put a lot of editing and production in
It
my more
shows.
later ones, my earlier ones were a little, more simple. But my later ones, yeah, I try to put, something so at least the audience has a nice time watching it.
Definitely, your editing skills are on point. That shows that you put a nice, like you said, especially lately. I mean, the backgrounds and how everything you're saying is accentuated by what's going on, and it's
Oh,
perfect.
thanks. Oh,
It's
thank
exactly
you.
the way I feel it should be done.
Thank
Uh,
you. That's great.
if and I know you have a 3-year old, so I'm sure you're used to playing games. And I was wondering if before we started to wrap up tonight, I could play
Yeah.
a quick game with you.
Okay.
And here's how it's gonna play. I'm
This is
gonna
the
give you.
Thanos snap. Okay.
This is it. This is it. This is it. You have a choice here. You can. I'm going to present to you two options, a multiple option. I'll do
Yeah.
this 5 times. I'm going to present to you two options, and you get to choose. You get to bring this back, whatever this is, or Thanos snap it out of existence and erase it.
And there's two things, and I have to Thanos snap half of it gone.
Correct. One gets to
I
come
mean,
back, and then they're
this-
both gone
this-
at this point. They're both
this-
gone. They're not.
Right,
They're
right.
not-
There you go.
yeah.
We're actually bringing one out of two back. is
Correct. You're
what it
bringing
is.
one back, but the other is Thanos snapped. It's gone. So you ready for the first one?
Yes.
Okay. You have a choice. Either bring it back or snap it out. Superman peanut butter or the Hostess Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pies. I don't know if you remember those. The
I do.
green ones, fresh from
Yeah.
the sewer.
Yeah.
You get to bring back one of them.
No, I would bring back the Superman peanut butter. I have no question, and I'm not sure why that is, but I would 1000% pick Superman peanut butter.
Wow.
to bring back.
Right.
Yeah,
Maybe I should have put peanut
there's
butter.
a '70s vibe to that I just like.
Yeah. Right. I think it was one of the few products that actually got like a an endorsement from DC because it was supposed to be a healthy product, or at least food. All right. How about
Meanwhile,
let's?
diabetes is increasing, but yeah,
Oh,
for
I know.
sure.
All right. 99% sugar, 3 peanuts in the whole damn thing. All right. How about Justice League? Now we'll go animated. Justice League Unlimited or Super Friends?
Oh yeah, Justice League Unlimited is so good.
Yeah.
I would have to pick that. I mean, Super Friends had its time, but just that Bruce Timm stuff. I mean,
Mm,
wow.
remarkable.
And the
Right.
way it ended with Darkseid and Superman fighting, and then they all said goodbye, and I shed a tear, man.
Oh yeah. And the adventure begins. Right. I think that was
Yeah.
one of the last line. Yeah, it was so well done. So well done. All right, here we go. Number 3. Ready? Here we go.
Mhm.
The Spider-Man or Batman cereal. In the 90s, I think they made a Spider-Man cereal.
Woo!
And they made, I'm going to talk, when I say Batman cereal, I'm talking 1989 Batmania,
Yeah.
Michael Keaton Batman cereal.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got those Burger King cups and all that stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they were like glass, molded glass. I mean, they were
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about Batman cereal
Right.
or Spider-Man cereal. God, that's yeah, so this is interesting. It's that 1989 Batman. So all that merchandise is so special. I guess I'd pick the Batman cereal. Wow, look at that. Even though Spider-Man's my favorite character, I would pick the Batman cereal. There was something about Batman '89. That was a special year.
I'm sure I can picture Prince eating a bowl of it.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So
that was probably the one visually normal thing he was doing at that time. Was eating that,
I will say that between the peanut butter and the cereal, we're not doing too healthy here. But we're okay.
Yeah, that's
we're
sugar
okay.
all around, huh?
All right.
That's the next book. Superheroes cause diabetes. That's the
superheroes cause diabetes. Oh my god. All right, number 4, Comet the Super Horse, which we don't see very often, or Throg, the Thor frog.
Oh yeah, Throg. Yeah, the Thor frog.
Yeah.
I would the Throg for sure.
Oh,
yeah, when I saw him in the Loki show for like a second, I was like,
oh yeah,
my heart lit up. I was like, huh? Okay.
So not the space horse that can turn into a man that's obsessed with Supergirl. Not smart move. Smart choice.
Yeah, there's something about that Weisinger era.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's not a special place in a lot of people's hearts, but
yeah, not that one. Not that one. And lastly, and this is a tough one, because I think we're going to see him in the Flash probably the last time. But
okay.
Ben Affleck's Batman or Henry Cavill's Superman.
Oh God, that's hard, right?
Yeah.
But Man of Steel. When I first saw it, I liked it more than a lot of people did. Or then
solid.
The I think Gen X people like it. Is my impression. You liked it too, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the only critique I had of it,
the neck breaking.
You know what? No, actually, I kind of I thought that was a nice trigger to maybe make Clark hate Superman, hate the idea of death, hate as a last resort. So I thought that was actually fairly clever. There's 2 things that stuck out. I'm a big product placement guy, and I know I just asked about Hostess cakes, and they're not sponsoring me. Although if Hostess is listening, you want to bring back those damn turtle pies, I'm all for it. But I mean, there was so much obscenely placed product placement throughout that film. IHOP, Sears. I mean, it was. I can't try to think what else that sticks. I mean, Martha Kent is walking around with the Sears necklace on. It was so much.
I didn't notice that. I'll watch it again. That's
painful. Once I hope I didn't ruin it, because once you see it, you're not gonna be able to unsee it. I mean,
you can't unsee it, huh?
I think Clark's walking around with a Budweiser, clearly label out for the camera, getting the hard cam, but it was a little much for me. And the other thing is this one scene where Clark and Lois kiss. And I think it's their first kiss, possibly, and it's on the ashes of Metropolis, as the city is being pounded into dust, and how many countless millions upon millions of people they are standing on top of as they're bracing this. It's not really the right time. It was very I don't know. this is not the place for it. This is not
Well,
the
I mean,
time.
I think that's like a Henry Kissinger, right? Power is the ultimate aphrodisiac, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I guess it worked with Lois. I don't know.
it
Yeah.
worked on her, yeah.
Oh my gosh. But
Um, you
there's like
know,
you
and
can see like a little hand sticking out of the ground, shaking, trembling for help, and they're kissing on top of the damn ruins of the city. I
help
don't know.
us. We're still under here.
Yeah, wait, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. I'm busy.
Yeah. That's right.
But other than that, I really enjoyed. The only
Right.
thing about Ben Affleck is I don't think he got a fair chance. He never got to solo a movie.
Right.
He's like
I
the only.
agree. I mean, I
Yeah.
would have enjoyed that. You know,
Yeah.
I warmed up to that.
Hmm.
But Henry Cavill Superman, I really liked it. And I thought that that whole thing with him fighting against that gravity machine,
Yeah.
overcoming it, like
Right.
I felt how hard that was just watching that. I mean, that was so well done. And then when they were harassing his mom and he flies in and beats
Oh
his
yeah.
face saying, "Don't mess with my
You
mom."
felt
I mean,
that absolutely. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I feel this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's the thing with Superman, you know, it's hard for me anyway. Like Christopher Reeve was enchantment and I loved it and I still do. And it's still my favorite. But you know, it's hard for me to feel much with a Superman story. I don't cry at a Superman story really. And I don't,
Hmm.
you know, I don't get, you know, the like X-Men and Wolverine and you know, I relate. I that resonates. I don't know if I could really feel. And when I watched Man of Steel, I felt
Right.
something, and it was something good and honest, and so that's why when people rag on it, I just kind of I let them rag on it. I don't really. I'm not a you know a person that's gonna unflinchingly defend it, but
Hmm. Sure. Sure.
I loved it, and I would bring back Henry Cavill Superman
Oh.
over
Okay.
Ben Affleck's Batman if I had to Thanos snap that one.
Oh. Wow. So that's a tough. That was a Sophie's choice kind of
That's a
decision. I
tough
see.
one. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
want Ben Affleck. I want a Ben Affleck Batman. I mean, we're gonna get a little bit of that in this Flash movie, I guess.
Yeah, I think I purportedly, who knows what tomorrow might bring, what announcement will come after the film, but I think that's his final Batman appearance, from what I
Yeah,
understand.
right.
I
And
could
I'm
be wrong.
that's part of the reason why I'm watching that because
Yeah,
I wanna conclude that in my mind.
right. And you know, I jokingly was actually saying to, I'm a teacher. I was saying to one of my students, I said months ago, and following Ezra Miller and saying, "Oh gosh, this is a tragedy. It's
I know.
disgusting what's going on." And then the Flash preview comes out. I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe
Yeah,
Ezra
I'm
Miller's
okay with it.
not too bad. I mean, those Hawaiians, they're you know, they
That's
don't
what I mean. It's like the whole Hugh
they
Hefner
don't know.
syndrome. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone knew what Hugh Hefner was doing, but you know, if you were
yeah,
invited to the mansion, it was yeah, it's
yeah.
fine.
Right.
You know?
Well, from what I understand, that's the mansion is the location of the impetus of the Batman '66 series. From what I understand, that like it
Yeah.
was an executive at a Playboy party that was kind of Batman themed and said, "Hey, let's
Yeah.
do this."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's all it's
I don't
full
think it
circle.
was Bill Dozier. I forget if it was
Yeah, it was definitely an executive.
or what Lorenzo. Am I getting the name right? Lorenzo Semple
You're
Jr. or something.
if you're even close to it, you're way better. I can't think of who it is. I just
But
knew it was
it
a
was one of those
yeah.
two that they were at the mansion and they watched the Batman serial from the 40s
Oh, okay. I thought it was a
at
Batman themed party. I'm messing up my own
yeah
story.
for no
Yeah.
I think it was on movie night. I think you know Hef had a movie night and
Oh
he
yeah.
would watch old stuff and I think one of them was the Batman serial of the 40s and then the guy was like and then I think the idea was he went and grabbed some you know comics off the newsstand at an airport and then
Right.
that was kind of the genesis
Pretty cool stuff.
of the Batman 66 show. Have you
See,
seen any
some
of
good
that
stuff does come
audition
out of.
footage?
Oh yeah, Burt Ward's. I was watching Burt Ward's
Yeah, where
audition
he's like in
footage.
his little
Right.
Robin Hood tights or whatever and
Yeah.
doing
Right. Yeah.
karate and all.
Yeah.
But
It's really wildly entertaining. It really
yeah,
is.
but there's some black and
Yeah.
white footage of Adam West and Green and Van Williams and Bruce Lee like at a conference
Oh.
and Bill Dozier is hosting it. Have you seen
Mhm.
that?
No. No.
I'll send you that link too. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's interesting to see Bruce Lee. You can see he's shy. You can tell he's totally shy
Yeah.
in a room
Yeah.
full of white people in 1965
Yeah.
or 66.
Yeah.
And then his audition footage is pretty cool. You know, it's just that whole production team was pretty interesting. Their whole approach though
It is.
was mocking the superhero, and that actually set superheroes back in film and TV for quite a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, I would love to read an article. I would love to read an article about superheroes without the words "bam," "pow," "boom" coming out.
Oh God, they
Some,
always do that. And it's
yeah.
funny. Stan Lee was on Larry King. I have this clip too, but it was funny where he's on Larry King in like the year 2000, and he's talking about the variety of things, but then he's like, I wanted superhero books to have some realism to it, and then Larry King goes, realism, huh? What, bam, boom, bow, and then and Stan goes, those are that's what do you say? Those are sound effects, you silly person. And like he really put Larry in his place there.
Yeah, right.
He's like, those are sound effects, you silly person.
Yeah, that's funny.
And
that's
that
funny.
was just awesome because they're sound effects. I mean, it's a visual medium. How are you going to put sound effects? That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, but it's so. I mean, I do love, you can't go wrong with onomatopoeia, but at the same time, it doesn't need to be referenced in every critique of.
Yeah, they do that all the time because again, it's a demeaning. Painful. I find it's a demeaning way,
absolutely,
of referring to the superhero comic book.
You know what? I had a teacher, comic book historian, Tim Smythe, on the show, and he has a history of comics, and he's touring. And he's one of the people like yourself that's trying to redefine the way people look at the industry, look at comic books, and say, it's not just this juvenile medium that you can dismiss. There is a great deal to learn from both the comics themselves and the creators of it. So for that and your contribution to comic book history, I thank you. I mean, because you're doing a remarkable job, Alex. Oh, please.
You as well. You have there's some tidbits you put up. I'm like, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Oh, you know what? I love it. I love it. That was my intention. My intention was, as you're on the account, as you're looking at it, you're just saying to yourself, I didn't know that. And you want to go repeat it to someone. And I don't even care if there's accreditation. I don't even care if you're like, you know what I just saw on Cosmic Comic History with a little wink and a smile. But I just want the idea that you found it interesting and you want to tell someone else, and you're
That's
enjoying
what it comes down to, right? That's the initial thing about it is like, we're just so excited about it. We want to share it with people.
I miss the days, I'm sure you do too, where you bought a comic book, you rolled it up, put it in your pocket, you went out and hung out with your friends, and you gave that comic to your friend, and if you never saw it again, you were cool with it because you were glad that your friend enjoyed it. He would
part
give
of that
you
magic. I never related that, but you're right. That's part of the whole point of it. That's probably what we're doing here in a virtual way.
No, absolutely. And that was one of my favorite things about joining social media, and again, another industry that can be dismissed as quickly as we're discussing it now, but there's a great deal of benefit to it. I've met so many amazing creators, and when I say creators, I mean like in the comic book industry, whether it's people that are self-publishing their own books, whether it's people that are artists, writers, and it is so remarkable that I don't think I could have done that had it not been for the social media medium. I wouldn't have met amazing people such as yourself.
Well, that's nice. Thanks. I mean, I feel the same way. We wouldn't have connected. We don't live close enough to have connected in any other way, right?
This is such an amazing thing, and for that I thank you, and for what you're doing for the comic book industry and what you're doing for these creators, kind of giving them a new life through your book. And
that's nice. Thanks.
Yeah, really, and just so that people get a deeper understanding. As you said, a lot of people are dismissive about the contributions of certain people. It's easy to read a snippet of something and say, "Oh, Stan Lee is this or that," and you could do the same for Jack Kirby. You could go on and on. Steve Ditko. And what you're doing really is giving these men who have passed another chance for fans to really get to know them, get to know their work, and
I think that's the idea.
And your passion for it shows,
and honor what they've done.
And it's great, and they deserve it, and you deserve that praise as well. So thank you, and I really do hope you have a lot of fun touring, promoting the book.
Thank you.
I hope that people, I'll put the link along with this video for the Amazon pre-order, and I'll be sure to go check out the blurbs and see what the experts have said.
Yeah.
Which I could already tell you, as you mentioned, but you already knew that they were, I already knew, maybe you didn't, but I knew that they were going to have as much confidence in the book.
Well, thank you. You never know. When I was like, there was a little moment of sweat where I'm like, God, what if they just laugh at this thing? And then, but when I got those back, I'm like, oh, thank goodness.
Right. Just one 3-letter meh comment,
that could have happened.
You know what, I think you're underselling, and it probably speaks to your humility, your ability. And
Okay.
if as someone who's watched your videos, who's someone who's learned quite a bit from your videos, because uh, get my older brother is the one who introduced me to comics. He was, I mean, he can name every creator of every artist. And I'm getting to that point. I think I
Right.
am. There were a number of years where I tapped out of
Well,
collecting
you
and
said
reading.
something about Robert Kanigher and the Wonder Woman multiverse. Like there was some aspect
Oh
of
yeah,
this that he had. That was cool. I mean,
well,
that,
that one, I think it
that
was
was
Wonder
cool. That was
Woman.
cool stuff there.
I may be getting my years and numbers mixed up. I think it was Wonder Woman 52 in maybe 1951 or
Yeah, it was in
adverse
the
or
early
maybe
50s, but yeah.
right.
I mean,
And
I still feel, Gardner Fox's Flash of Two Worlds was what made
right.
it really mainstream in DC.
I think
But
what you're
but
presenting,
but
yeah,
but but Kanigher was a genius. I mean, that
right.
was his story in the first, showcase for Flash, and that's cool that he had that dabbling in multiverse stuff. I mean, he
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
pulp, he read pulps, and he was a genius. And that's cool that you highlighted that aspect of what he did.
And
So
I think,
again, I mean, that
yeah,
again,
well,
I
thank you.
learned from you too.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. That means a lot. Actually, I hopefully in the upcoming issue of Spoiler Magazine, I wrote a larger extension of that multiversal concept from both Marvel and DC's end.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
I think that lends itself too to your Phantom Superman argument, where the idea may have been introduced, but
Yeah.
Flash in this case expanded on it and made it more appealing to the general
Yeah,
public.
once everyone starts hopping on it and
Right,
they're
right,
copying it because it sold well, I feel like
and
I feel like there's some additional relevant factor there.
I
And
agree.
some
Yeah,
people say, well, money's superficial, but it is a driving force of the industry. It's a commercial art.
yeah, you got to keep it right. Can't You got to feed those artists and writers.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
But that's where the underoos come in. That's where you got to start selling more underoos. But
Get that Superman peanut butter. Get
yeah,
that
wait,
going.
this is the chance. Bring it back. This is the perfect time.
Pound some
Screw,
Batman cereal on it. Chug that.
screw the. Just dip it. Just dip the whole thing in. Screw Peter Pan peanut butter. We don't need it. Bring back
Yeah,
Superman peanut butter. This is it.
absolutely, man. I'm
Right.
so for the Superman peanut butter.
Let's
Absolutely.
do it. And the commercial was amazing. For some reason, Lex Luthor's stealing peanut butter. I don't know why. Who knows? You don't need to
I
know.
love that stuff. I love that stuff.
Right. But Alex, thank you so much for your time. You
Yeah,
are
thanks, Tom. I really
absolutely
enjoyed
amazing.
this. I appreciate it.
Oh, same here, same here. I had a great time, and I learned quite a bit, and I can't wait for your book to hit shelves. I can't wait for the pre-order. Hopefully, Amazon always surprises me sometimes, that pre-order date, and then it arrives like a little bit
Yeah,
early. So
I mean that's definitely possible for sure.
yeah, I'm psyched. I'm psyched.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much
Thanks.
for your time. And if anyone is looking to follow Alex Grand, you want to find him at Comic Book Historians on YouTube and TikTok. Now, is it always with an S? I think sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. It's comic book historians, but on Twitter there isn't enough letters, so that's comic historians.
Okay, gotcha. So great stuff, and I love seeing your content on the daily. Very cool. Thanks a
Thank
lot for
you.
your time. I'm Tom Torme. This was the Cosmic Comic Nation, and until next time, be well and stay safe.